the March 12th, 2018 Committee of the Whole. And can we stand for a moment of silence and then the pledge? All right, please join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Everyone in favor of adopting the agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the February 12th, 2018 Committee of the Whole. Do I have a motion to approve the Strategic Education, Policy and Personnel and Operations Committee agenda?
I have to abstain, I wasn't here.
Okay? All right, so can I get a motion to put it on the floor and then?
Kevin moves.
Okay, so Kevin made a motion.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, so Cindy is abstaining because she wasn't here. Okay, what other questions?
I'll probably just say because I was gone for about half of it. So.
Okay.
You want to go back over briefly?
Yeah, so on, whereas in policy FF in the name of facilities, it says that I abstained. That's not correct.
Okay, so we can fix that.
Yes, please.
All right,
Which agenda is that?
policy and personnel.
Policy.
So can we let Jarita get to there?
I have it.
Okay, so we can fix that. All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes with the one correction that Reverend Mack made. Mr. Hollenshed, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Coates?
Abstain.
Ms. Jeffrey?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
I'll say for some.
Okay. Mr. Staub?
Yes.
Reverend Mack?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion passes. And now Chris is here and just take over, and we're on the evaluation process with Dr. Bridges.
All right. Please come join us.
And Dr. Bridges, if you don't mind, some of us are eating our lunch, so hopefully that is okay.
And he's welcome to take a seat.
Yeah, you can sit right here if you want to and just, yeah, you can stop.
We don't have to turn around.
I'm sure you're going to be looking that way.
Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the board, and public, it's good to be with you again. It seems every time I visit you in Charleston, it seems to be snowing and sleet and growing.
We've noticed that too,
Yes.
that when you show up, the sun does not come.
Yeah, really. But I appreciate the opportunity to get. So I'm going to run through this PowerPoint and stop at any time if you have questions. What I've tried to do is take all the feedback that you provided, as well as looking at evaluation models from 4 other school districts. And those districts range in size from 16,000 to 140,000. And the uniqueness about it is that all of them are different. It's a process whereby you will have to decide whether it's important in terms of your evaluation. So I did pull some things together to put in this, just for your review. And I'm not really tech savvy, so I probably pressed the wrong button all the time.
I should just sit down here. We can hear them better.
Your vision and mission, these things are obviously you both have to use, and I knew to me, I've always looked at vision for organizations as what you aspire to be. And I've always looked at mission as basically how you accomplish that. So really like your mission statement about educating children for college, career, and citizenship. I looked at your labeled those as ongoing goals. It's kind of a 5-year process, and I won't read them to you, you're very familiar with them, but I did change, I added a few things in, given my conversations with Dr. Oswald. Goal 2 is something that she is very interested in and focusing a lot of her attention on, increasing the percentage of students reading on level by 3rd grade. And we all know if you can move that team, you can move a lot of things within your school year. So that was one change, or addition to it. She also spoke about developing teachers and leaders in your organization, which does tell very well with codified in your strategic plan. And down at goal 9, she has talked about equity in terms of distribution of resources throughout the system, and that could have gone under 9, it probably could have gone under 6, but I just put it under 9. So as I said, those are what I can identify as ongoing goals that could fit very well into your evaluation process for the superintendent. We've talked about a lot of things in the feedback that you've given me, whether it be high school graduation and dropout rate, just a lot of goals, and I'll show you about where you can talk about those all the time. But I would be hard pressed to find anything in your organization that you want to address that are not in these 9 areas. So the evaluation process in and of itself. Establish those ongoing goals as the part that you would use to evaluate the superintendent in the first part. I also understand that those 9 goals in and of themselves may not specifically speak to some of the things that you want to do. So I left some room in there for what I call priority goals, that when you sit down at the end of the evaluation process and you decide the successes and continuous improvement items from the previous school year, and as you go into the next one, there may be some specific things that you would like to have done. So in addition to those 9 goals, you may have that conversation with the superintendent in terms of some priority goals that you would like to add to that. I will caution you on having 15 to 20 goals. I have found that it is better to be good at a selected few things than to be average at a whole lot of things. So just kind of keep that in mind, even though you do have room in this process to add some goals beyond the ongoing goals. The process of talking about those goals. I think that there needs to be indicators about the goals and the fact that they're going to be monitored. Information about continuously improving the district, and providing the board with data on a regular basis to make sure that those first 2 bullets take place. And then in the end, using that same data as the assessment tool for the superintendent's performance. The evaluation process will be conducted on the July to July cycle. And I can see those conversations maybe starting at the end of June, but primarily in July. And that portion will address the ongoing goals part of the evaluation, that information that you've been presented with, the goals that you've agreed on for the school year, July to July, and you can make that a part of the evaluation. Now, some of the conversation that we've had is assigning a percentage to that. And I didn't go into that. That's a conversation for the board to have in terms of what the first part of the evaluation, the July to July, and ongoing goals part would count as a certain percentage of the evaluation. The second piece of that is the academic results from the state or local assessments, which typically come in October, November, and would be the final piece or the second half of that evaluation. And that would also be assigned a certain percentage that the board can address. So in part, the July to July cycle will match up with the superintendent's contract. Responsibilities, of course, it'd be the responsibility of the superintendent to know the process and understand that, to gather data and documents and evidence to support attaining the goals, develop strategies and implementation of those goals, And then the final part of that will be, when the student information comes in October, November, that will be the final piece of the evaluation, and those will be the superintendent's responsibilities. Board responsibilities would be to ensure that the steps of the evaluation and process are followed, and also that everybody takes part in the process. Identify the strengths of the superintendent and also those continuous improvement areas, and also they communicate how those can be improved. Ensure the superintendent's summary evaluation contains accurate information, and then everybody participates in the evaluation of the superintendent in establishing, reviewing those goals, and also in establishing goals for the following year as you kind of end and begin a new process. As kind of a three-step deal, lead the school board superintendent, the school board rating the superintendent, and then the final evaluation. And step one, the superintendent of the board will review the materials and all the information that you have in a new process in terms of what that evaluation will look like. Superintendent of the board will agree on the conditions as it relates to scope, timeline, goals, evidence, things that may be an issue if there are level of improvements that need to be had, as well as potential benefits of doing things extremely well. Second part of that is the board will discuss the superintendent progress, and I think you get quarterly, and I would even say maybe mid-year information about the goals. Superintendent can provide that information to you. If there's additional documentation that's needed for the discussion, then the board will let the superintendent know that, and you can agree on the timeline for that information to be submitted. And step three is basically the board taking each goal, each individual board member, and assigning a rating to that. The board will meet in the executive session to discuss the individual ratings and agree on a single rating for each goal. The board should make every effort to achieve consensus on rating of each of the goals. The consensus rating on each goal will be shared with the superintendent at the appropriate time. As the board, individual rating skills may be asked for, but they're not required because it's an evaluation of the board and not just individual. Evaluation rubric. I go back and forth on 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, and I took this from one of the entries that I saw where the ratings are proficient, accomplished, distinguished, and not demonstrated. And as you get to the rubric, you kind of see how those fall out. And at the stipulation of not demonstrated, that's where those superintendent has not addressed the goal at all or not adequately, then it would be a not demonstrated. We would challenge board members, if you give a not demonstrated, to provide comments and feedback to the superintendent about expectations and how that could be done. The rating, something, as I said, should be filled out by all school board members. And I've kind of explained to you if you use the not demonstrated expectation of that. It's hard for me to see it from here. I know you have your packet of information. One of those, there's a corner version of this. I just don't know which button it is. If you look up here, or look at, well, it won't show them. One of the things that kind of, one of those, if they were numbers, I guess you would say, this, and it gives you an average of that. Kind of here, and I use 5 board members. I know you have 9, just to make it easy. So you had 2 distinguished, 2 accomplished, and 1 not demonstrated. And kind of in the middle of that would be proficient. if you had 3 distinguished and 2 accomplished, then accomplished would be that. You kind of get the feel for, count the number of areas that have been assigned and kind of get a middle ground on that. You got 3
Dr.
distinguished.
Bridges, just 1 minute.
Sorry.
Hold on, I'm having technical difficulty over
Yeah,
here.
sorry. Okay.
Just brief.
Sorry.
Just brief.
Okay.
And just kind of getting a feel for that, if you have 3 distinguished and 1 proficient, 1 not demonstrated, then it's an accomplished. So you'll get the feel of this. It's just a matter of sitting down and assigning each goal one of these, and then you go through and kind of determine where they fall, and then you look here and you get an overall rating of accomplished. But that's really not as important as I just like the words better than I like the numbers. That's the reason why I put that. There was a question asked at the last meeting. What would be the process if we didn't do a rating system at all? And I've answered that question by saying I've been superintendent of 5 districts. 3 of 5 did not use a rating system. Obviously, most of this information will be the same. You would have the same meetings. You look at your ongoing goals, the strategies and implementation of those, the mid-year or quarterly meetings to update that information, all the way down to the final evaluation. That will all pretty much stay the same. What will be different is that at that final meeting, the information, the report would be provided by the superintendent on all the goals that have been laid out for that school year. And that will be presented to the board in executive session. The superintendent will be available to respond to questions, concerns, any information that you need about the report, which you get in advance. Superintendent will be excused, and the board would spend time discussing each of the goals in the report and talking about the accomplishments or continuous improvement items for the superintendent. When you come to consensus on that, superintendent could be invited back into the room, and necessarily have to be on the same day, to the findings of that to be shared with the superintendent in terms of performance. And a written document should be provided to the superintendent, and also the board would be charged with drafting a response that would be provided to the local media and the community in terms of the overall views of the performance of the superintendent. So that is a process, and when I talked to you the last time I was here, I was and I said it too many times, and I'll say it again, this is a communication piece. If you're going to sit down and have a conversation about things that are going well and things that are not going well, and how we can work as a team to improve those things, then that's valuable information for not only the board, but for the superintendent. And then you go from there. So that can also be in that July to July cycle. It really doesn't change anything. Every time you eventually arrive at an evaluation summary for the superintendent. I found 2 policies, policy CBI and policy BD, that will need some attention no matter how you, which one of these processes you use, if you're using one. There will need to be some word changing, not drastic changes, just some minor adjustments to those policies. And that statement, if you don't use a rating system, will be released, drafted by the board, but released, of course, by the board chair. So that's a quick run through of the information that I provided to you. I think you got it in advance, so I would be more than glad to respond to any questions or concerns, or none of this will work and go back and start all over.
What questions we have?
So this isn't for you, but I think, Eric, one of the things that we're going to need very quickly is Google Docs category for superintendent evaluation, and so that this documents can be captured and put in there just like agenda minutes, but it needs to have its own category, because we're going to be asked as we go throughout this process for years to come, why this, what that, what did it say before? So can we get a category on there for that? My second question is, these 9 goals came from the CCSD strategic plan. It might be good that as we're talking about this, because for the public, it's always good if we tie it back when that was adopted. So these 9 goals came from the strategic plan adopted by the board, and that way we can always remember how to tie it back to where they came from. The only suggestion that I have for you is I see the need to have a comment section for the lowest rating. I would ask that we have one for the highest as well. Given that you have, and this is just something that I did in my other worlds, you exceed, and then you exceed exceeding. And I used to tell my employees that, if Jesus himself came down here to do your job, I'd be hard pressed to say he exceeded the exceeding of the goal. So we might want to have a comment for distinguished.
For me, you mean?
Can I just ask a question of the group? Dr. Bridges said that in his experience, in some places they had the number ranking and in some places they didn't. What do you?
I prefer this one, with the number range.
With the number ranking?
What do you mean, Ms. Elway?
Like he,
The second to the last page.
like here's the rubric, and then some places that he's worked, the board would just, they wouldn't rank with numbers. They would just talk and reach consensus that in that category, the person was proficient, or in that category, they were accomplished.
I like numbers.
Numbers.
I agree.
But also, using the category on the improving academic. Gotta find it again. The first goal, maximizing academic achievement. Ensure every student is career, college, and citizenship ready. Then I mentioned in the workshop about setting some definitive goals to stretch for, to reach for, and I want to know where we are with that. And I don't mean that it has to be something impossible to get to, but that we have some type of goal we're reaching for. For example, if kids are reading, if we're 70% on kids reading successfully, then maybe we at least have a goal of 73% or 72%. We got to have some type of goals that we're looking for, and not that. I guess when I consider a teacher evaluation, and what they go through, that we had the rubrics, we had the DEF program, and they evaluated on their overall performance of how they're doing, and the district has rubrics that they use to identify why the person received this score or that score. So I'm thinking it has to kind of be a similar pattern. Teacher and superintendent has to kind of be something similar. That would be generic from the head on down to the least employee, if there is such a thing as least employee. So I'm looking to see I want to know what can we do to have some type of goals.
Right, do we, the doctor to answer that? Or do
Yeah, so can you, I think what Chris is asking is, can you put a specific number goal on whatever goal, like, 50% or 70% of kids, but to go along with that, I don't think our teachers, they don't have that kind of they don't have a goal like that. Their rubric doesn't have that,
Right.
so.
Priscilla, you might have some teacher.
Yeah. Education's really complicated, and on a superintendent's first year, they're walking into a situation of which they have no control.
Yeah.
I mean, they have somewhat control, but,
They're learning.
and also
They're learning.
change in schools takes 3 to 5 years, and programs take 3 to 5 years. Sorry to say, but that's how long it takes, and there's a lot of working parts.
Yeah.
So to make the superintendent have to answer to a 73% or whatever is pretty impossible. Not that it couldn't be done,
Yeah.
but you got to get everybody on board.
Yeah.
And 50,000 kids.
Yeah, I use that for an example. I mean, it might be 50%, might be 60%. I'm just saying I want to have
For
some type
me,
of
I'd
goal.
like 80, but I don't
Yeah,
think that's
yeah.
going to happen tomorrow.
And you said
So
it right.
50 is shooting too low if you were asking
Right.
50%.
As long as we have a goal in mind that we're aiming for. That doesn't mean that she didn't make it that goal, that she did something wrong, and that's not what I mean at all.
Then why do we put
Because we're
another-
aiming for excellence. We're
Well,
aiming
that's
for-
what it says.
We're aiming to improve where we
So-
are.
So, Dr. Bridges, you can weigh in at any point where we can let these folks give their thoughts, and you
We'll
can
go
weigh in
on
after
for-
you've heard the thoughts. I think, Cindy.
But I think this is a two-point thing. First off, that's exactly why we have to be always tying back where this came from. What you missed, Reverend Collins, is that if I'm correct, Dr. Bridges said these goals came from the strategic plan
Yeah, I heard that.
that we approved. So that's what you approved as a goal in the strategic plan. If you don't want that to be a goal in the evaluation, then we write goals for the evaluation, or we change the strategic plan or tell them not to follow the plan. But we approved this. I agree with you. You and I are on the same page with how it looks. Just know that this was created because we
Yes.
approved the strategic plan that said this. If we want the strategic plan to be more specific, which then creates an evaluation that's more specific, we need to have that conversation. But Dr. Bridges did his job and
Yeah.
followed the strategic plan.
I think so. I mean, it might be SC rated scores, could be HSAP scores, in the court scores, MAP scores. Something that we look at for growth somewhere, got to look somewhere for growth. Or we can just take a small percentage of where we are in our district and say, well, let's try to make this goal for this coming year, this goal for the following year, some kind of percentage that's positive.
Kevin?
Yeah, but someone makes an interesting point. When a superintendent is hired and brought in, she said it takes, and she's right, it takes 3 to 5 years to establish themselves. I think the evaluation needs to be altered within the first 3 to 4 years to state what realistic goals that you want to see the superintendent achieve in that first year, in that second year, and that third year. Because, interesting that we went to a couple of seminars, there are habits with superintendents that come in, the ability to look at staff, retool, may not retool, how they come in and put forth implement their plans. All that needs to be coupled into the evaluation, because when it comes time to evaluate that superintendent, we have to look at how effectively that person dealt with the staff in general, the teachers in general. She may come up with an operational plan, or she wants to develop and implement. That has to be reviewed by the board, but that should be incorporated into her evaluation. You shouldn't just have a rubric of 5 generic things that you want to say, but it's not tailored to the first year. It's not tailored to the second year. It's not tailored to the fourth, or fifth year. So that's just something, in my observation, that was a good observation you made, Priscilla, and that's what I'm kind of interested in.
I agree.
And,
Dr. Bridges, can you address how in the past, or how you think the whole, like if number 2 of our goal of increasing the percentage of students reading on level by grade 3, should we be putting percentages to that, or goals, so 50% in the second year, 75%. What do you say about how we should do that or not?
I've seen that both ways. And pretty much everything that everybody says is true. I think it's a 3 to 5 year process, no matter how you put that in. I guess what I'm going back to is, you can come up with a lot of goals. And, I've looked at the report from last year. You have information that you get from your staff in terms of assessment and evaluation. I think it's pages and pages and pages of information. If you say that your directional system is a strategic plan, which is what I've gathered, then that needs to be measured. I think if you've gone to the community, went through a lot of work to develop that 5-year plan, it's an important piece. It's your directional system. So if you want to say that's over here, we're going to measure it, But there are other things that we want to look at. Then you got to decide. Because I don't know that administration, without being really overloaded in the second and third year of dealing with these 8 goals in the strategic plan, 15 more goals that have just been outlined by the board, and all of a sudden you're very average at a lot of things. And I can't give you an example. The last time I was here about one of the school districts that I looked at, Wake County, 140,000 kids. They had one goal for 4 years. That all third graders would read, 95% of the third graders would read on level. That was it. Now, all the money and all the resources and all the professional development, and everybody at secondary level maybe got mad, but it was going to make that goal realized at the elementary schools. And the secondary schools knew that if we got that right, their jobs would be easier. So it's not that you gotta have 20. You gotta have 4 or 5 that are laser-like on what this organization wants to do. And I can tell you now, from a teacher, or a principal, the central office staff to the board, wake up every morning trying to figure out how to make this better and kids learn. We know that reading scores need to be improved, math scores, dropout rate, right? All of those things, whether you put them in a goal or not, your expectation is for those things to get better. Administration in our schools know that. They work on that every day. So we can affix a percentage to each one of these. How do you get to that number? I guess you could say we're at 70% now, and at the end of this 5-year strategic plan, we'd like for that number to be 82. If our dropout rate is 2.1%, by the end of this strategic plan, we'd like for that to be 1. And graduation rate reading for the whole piece. You can affix a number to it given where you're starting and what you'd like to see it be at the end of 5 years. But ultimately, that's not a number that I can give you. That's the number that you have to decide as a board and as administration.
Dr. Bridges, I guess I'm looking at it a little differently. If we affix a number or percentage to these goals on the superintendent side, then that means on the board responsibility side, those are responsibility have to change as well. Simply because if we say, okay, superintendent, you have to make sure 95% are at that level, well, the superintendent's going to say, well, are you going to make sure that I have the tools that I need to get there?
Exactly.
So it becomes to be a budgetary end on the other side. So for instance, if Ms. Ambrose says, I'm going to put, I want a certified teacher, 2 certified teachers in every third grade class. Well, Mr. Kennedy is going to know, like, well, how are we going to fund that? Where's the money going to come from? You know, if the CHU's not talking, you know, then it won't happen. So I just see that, you know, we can tie all the percentages we want, but on the board responsibility side, I believe that we're going to have some fiduciary responsibility in making sure that the funding is there and the tools is there for the superintendent. So the board just needs to keep that in mind, that as we make changes on one side, it also reflects on the other side.
We'll get some, we'll get
I
a,
think you had mentioned, during my first meeting here, the timing of the evaluation, and sometimes the budget's approved and we don't know that we need something by the time we find out that we need it, the budget's already approved. So, and kind of drifted into that conversation about what you just described. Okay, so if you say to me that I want the graduation rate to be 95%, I want the dropout rate to be 1%, I want all, before kids get to the third grade, I want to be reading on this particular level. And I just came up with 4, very, very powerful ones before. Well, then, okay. What the teachers are going to look at the principals and say, and the principal's going to look at the central office and the superintendent and say, okay, I need this to accomplish that in this period of time. And then as a board, you can say, we're willing to do that, or we're not willing to do that. So you're right, it's a conversation on both sides, because resources are not always just money. You know that. It's time, people, space, technology, information, and the ability to allow schools and the central office to use those resources differently, which means sometimes you're going to fail. You're gonna make mistakes and things aren't gonna work out. But you can't not do something because you have fear of it.
Chris is next.
Michael,
Chris
and
is
then
keeping
Cindy,
a
and
list.
then Chris.
Okay.
I see Reverend Collins' point as it pertains to goals and percentages of growth we'd like to see. I think Eric is right about if you were to set those types of goals, that it would also require other things to happen and impact budget and board decisions and, right? Since I've been on the board, I've heard the 3 to 5 year scenario for 5 years. So, should we even use that as a benchmark?
3 to 5 years.
Still says
Yes, the 3 to 5 years. Should we use that as a benchmark? Considering Eric's point, right? Eric said let's say Jarita and the staff say, well, in order for us to accomplish, let's use the Wade County goal of every third grader reading on grade level by third grade. Let's say we just use that as a baseline. And Jarita comes back to the board and says, okay, guys, in order for us to accomplish that, we have to have 2 certified teachers in every classroom. That has a budgetary impact. So let's say just for whatever reason, we can't do that, Eric. There's not enough money.
Right.
We can't generate it. So then are we now saying that goal, that initiative will never be reached, no matter how many 3 to 5 years we give it, because financially we can't do it? So is that then unfair to the superintendent, to the system, but more importantly, is it unfair to every single child in the district, because what we want to do, we can't do because of money, right? So I don't know if we should necessarily use the 3 to 5 year scenario as a litmus test or the measuring stick for what we want done, if we're going to be handicapped or handcuffed by a budget based on, like you said, because sometimes it's not just about money, it's about personnel, staff, technology, information, so on and so forth. So should we rethink
You're right.
how and what the outcomes should be, ought to be, and in how they're delivered?
You're right.
Because we can't move the goalpost, and we can't keep getting reset because the 3 to 5 year comes up because you need 2, 3 years, 4 years should be going. The next superintendent say, hey y'all, guess what? I need 3 to 5 years. All along, our students are not their goals are not being met academically. We're not where we need to be, and we're sitting there playing the 3 to 5 year game, and parents and students are playing the school choice option because they don't want. You see what I'm saying? I just don't know when and where it begins, where we fill in. I don't know.
I can be candy bar and tree.
I think
So here,
Cindy, then Chris, then Priscilla, then Kevin, if you want.
I think there's 2 conversations, and much like what Michael said, we've sat around this board table and we've had that conversation every single 6 months, 9 months, a year for the last 7 or 8 years, and we haven't come up with an answer. So we've got to come up with that answer if we're going to take that answer and tell somebody it becomes their job to meet that answer. So we either have to quit talking theory at this table or understand that as long as we keep talking theory, we're not telling anybody to go do tangible. The 2 things that I think that come to my mind is, I know that there's something that we say in this at CCSD is, what evidence will we accept to show that what we want to be happening is happening? I don't think we're going to have to put something tangible on something. We're going to have some level of evidence that we're willing to accept to say this is being done. I think we started that, Chris and Michael, about 5 years ago when you 2 were on the board before the last election cycle. And we did pretty good in the beginning, but then we took and piled 7 more goals on top of 4, and we bled through that cycle. We created that cycle and we bled through it. So we've got to get very disciplined on our ability to stick to something for more than 1 to 2 meetings, and decide. Because you can set any goal for any length of time. I do think we have to start having tangible conversations. What can we do within the confines of how this state allows us to operate? And does that match what we want? We can say, we can go out, we can go address the legislature, we can go address the public, we can tell them whether that matches what we want or not. But the reality is, what can we do within the confines of how this state allows us as a public school board to operate? And I do think we need to get to that sooner rather than later.
Chris?
Yeah, thank you. First, I'll pick it back up on Michael's direction, the 35. I think for me, if you have a 3-year goal or a 3 to 5 year goal or a 2-year goal, within that, you break it down year by year.
That's a Studer thing we did.
Yeah, the first year, we look at 1%, let's say, for example. Next year, look at another percent. And then until we get where we're going, then we can adjust that. But I think you put it in smaller increments. You don't sit back 5 years and see where we are. I think that's too late. So you have little mini goals. But I like what you said, not having a whole bunch of goals. And so my thoughts is this, board. What if we focus our efforts on just reading and math? Just 2 subjects and choose some type of goals to support those. Just reading and math only. Because if we get to reading, we get to math, we get everything that's going to fall in place. If we find some simple goals, just affect those 2 categories of reading and math, which we know we need to be improving in. And I think we have to figure out some kind of rubrics that we can work towards that. The board is in agreement with that.
So in your 3 to 5 years, you've had 2 superintendents, and I know things start over again, so that's just one piece of it. The other piece is things have been added in the little over a year that I've been here, like Jennifer Coker's job is relatively new. There's things that have been added in more recently to get to the goals that maybe you established 5 years ago that we haven't seen. So I think it is an ongoing thing. I think we changed our math curriculum this year. So we're still heading towards those 3 to 5 year goals, but they don't just happen like at the end of 3 years, because that's a date that we establish. It's an ongoing thing. And I had another point, which... aside from the math, and because I also believe that school climate is part of, if we don't have good school climate where kids feel safe in our schools, and I don't mean safe about SROs, I just
to
mean...
concentrate, to be able to concentrate on the subject.
Our kids many of our kids have lots of other needs, and if those needs aren't met, we can throw all the math and reading in front of them that we want, and they are not going to be successful. So that would be my third goal, is to make sure that schools are safe environments for kids to learn in.
Kevin, did you have something?
Yeah. Going back to what Michael was saying, let me just separate this for a second. You might not like what I say, but it has a little merit. The evaluation of superintendent, like I said again, you're not saying similar things, but it should be changed and altered year by year based upon the achievable goals. But the job of the school district and the mission statement of the district should not be placed upon the superintendent. Let me tell you why. The district should have its directional goals set if the superintendent wasn't here. It should be set based upon the academic and educational needs of the district's best interest. So say, for example, I'm just using in my backyard, Shakur Elementary should have a particular educational plan based upon the needs of its constituent base. Wando should have an academic plan based upon the needs of its constituents that go to attend that school. Now, the superintendent comes in and just adds the administrative part to run the district. But the structure should always remain the same. Because when we get caught up at, and specifically said again, I'll give you another kudo, must be reading my mind. But you change 3 different superintendents. And every time the superintendent comes in, at a seminar we went to together, the structure plan always changes. We need to get away from hiring a superintendent to change our structure and have our academic structure in place. Yes, ma'am.
The board's goals.
Yes, and keep it steady the way it needs to be. That's it.
Okay.
I wanted to just say, thanks to Dr. Bridges and Reverend Mack and all of us, because this is now a format and structure that we haven't had before. And before, we had policy that said one thing and the superintendent's contract that said the other thing, and 9 of us who all wanted to do different things. So I think this is a really good template for us, whether we, put the percentage goals in there or not, however we decide to do that. I think if we follow this format, then we've got a good process and template in place. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Eric.
Chris?
Just lastly, I just use goal 3 for example on the orange on goal 3. Provide learning opportunities that allow every student to develop and demonstrate talents, interests, and modern workplace skills. And I guess Dr. Posey, you probably have to help us to be able to discern how the board would know that we're reaching the mark of modern workplace skills and interests and talents. I wouldn't know how to measure it myself, but there may be a part in here that something we can measure, something that's kind of simple to measure, something more definitive, I'll say. Thank you.
Mike? And then Sean?
I agree with the conversation that we're having. I agree with Kevin's point that if the board has established a level of emphasis when it comes to academics, that regardless of who the superintendent or who the board is, the desired outcomes of students should outweigh the 9 of us or who the 9 of us are, or the superintendent or who the superintendent is.
Right, exactly.
So it's not static, right, the superintendent. It's continual and perpetual. But my concern and fear is that I don't want to see us get to a point where the goals that we desire for our children is hinged upon the budget, right? Like, we can't say, I can't say we can't say, let's say we said that the only way we can raise achievement is if we put 2 teachers in every classroom. And so because we can't afford to do that, does that mean that our mission and our vision as it pertains to what our outcomes ought to be, we can't make it now, Kevin? You see, I don't want, and I know it's tied to the budget, but I don't want the successes of our students, ergo teachers, principal, superintendent, to be solely based on an amount of money that we have, like Cindy said, that we can't control, we can't pour more in, we have what we have, and we have to pull the results from that pot. So if that pot doesn't grow, does that mean our results don't grow? If the pot grows, if the pot grows, does that mean our results grow? And if our results don't grow, then what? Why? Who? When? What do we change? What do we fix? And I think that is the mindset I think that I'm looking at overall, not just for us now, but as we continue to say this is important, because 3 to 5 years is too long for Michael. And so because it's too long for Michael, it's too long for Shakura, it's too long for Burns, it's too long for James Simmons, for A.C. Cochran, right? So although we say 3 to 5 years because professionals know that's the time for school culture and climate, but for the parents who need the results to happen like yesterday, how do we explain that the results are not coming as fast as we would like them to come? Is because maybe we got a new superintendent, or maybe we offer some new positions in the district that we didn't have before, or maybe because we don't have enough money because we can't put Promethean boards in. You see what I'm saying?
So, and I think you're onto something, but any organization this big has to have 2 layers of goals at all times. Because you're absolutely correct. In the 7 years, 6 years you've been on the board, And in the 7 years I've been on the board, neither you nor I know how much money it takes to meet a 90% reading on grade level proficiency. If we don't know how much money it takes, then we don't know if we have enough or not enough. And very much, yes, if it takes a 1 to 15 student to teacher ratio in order to get 90% proficiency, then we are the people who were elected to stand up and say that is not going to happen. We will not have 90% proficiency reading on grade level because we have studied everything and we know it takes a 15-to-1 ratio, and the state of South Carolina will only fund us a 23-to-1 ratio. So yes, money does determine outcomes if you trust your professionals to say, this is what it takes, and our job is to take that information, understand it, and believe it enough to go tell people, absolutely, that as long as you want to keep funding us 1 to 28 on fourth graders, when we know that it takes 1 to 15 and we've got tangible proof either within our system or within other systems that that does it, then yes, you have to understand every time you don't change how you fund us and you don't provide a 1 to 15, this is how we got 90% in 17 districts across the country. You're not giving it to us. So we've got to have both goals, but we have to do the best we can with what we have.
Yeah.
So you've got to have both. You can't throw your hands up in the air and say, I want a 1 to 15 ratio, but you're only going to give me a 1 to 20. Well, there it is. Half your kids aren't going to learn. We're going to have to make things work within what we have, but we've got to get very specific about what it takes so we can ask for what it takes. But I do want to know how are we going to determine from today's discussion what adds or changes to this are being done? What's our next steps? I mean, there's been some suggestions and some ideas and all of that. So what's next to say how do we get from this to the evaluation tool we're going to use?
So if you allow Chris to go, and then we'll wrap it.
Okay, so we're just trying to clean up. I just want to make one point. Just yes, if we can satisfy that requirement of kids reading on grade level by third grade, we'd probably get a Nobel Prize. That is a goal that I think that we should all be shooting for. But at the same time, I would like to keep in mind that we do have a lot of kids who are succeeding, and I know that when you grade to the test or whatever, I don't want to pull money away from things that are succeeding just because I know there is a limited run. I just want to point that out, that we would still expect this school district to continue to do what it's doing well, while trying to achieve the goal that will hopefully be something we all agree is something that we all want. And then the other thing, basically, I think we're going to try to wrap this up. If someone has something they really want to say real quick, I think Reverend Mack was going to try to kind of give us take us home on it.
Okay. So, Dr. Bridges, thank you first of all for putting together this presentation for today, and you've heard the summation from the board members' questions, and as far as how this process begins and move forward. I guess I don't know if we need to. The board needs more time to digest. This was sent to you on Friday, I believe, for preparation of questions, but there weren't any questions, but we have received them today. So, Dr. Bridges, do you need a response from us today, or you need?
No, I'm good whenever the board.
Okay.
Will send in
So if and you've heard some questions that have came from the board as to some next step or some kind of the rationale of where the thinking is on some of these goals and steps. So why don't we allow the board to take this week to digest this even more, and by close of business, by noon on Friday, if there's any questions or any additional concerns, you'll submit those to Portia, and then we'll forward those additional steps on to Dr. Bridges, and then by then the following week we'll have next step as to how we're going to move forward from the board. Is that feasible?
So input by Friday noon.
By noon Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Done.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I wrote a dissertation on school boards. And I did that for very good reason. I
We
wouldn't
must have did that while we were venting on something.
Is
it in all caps? The exclamation points every.
But you're about a school board, not
Yeah,
not
what
this
I'm
school
trying
board.
to say is, boards, and I said to you, you have an opportunity to be unique. And if you don't have all the resources that you need, you're not going to. But if you could get a laser-like focus on 3 or 4 things and stick with those because they're the right thing to do for children, it really doesn't matter in 2 years or 4 years if this board turns over, or if you get a new superintendent, it doesn't matter. We've done our research and we've decided these 4 things will move this district forward. It's the best thing for our kids. And when you get a new school board member during the orientation process, or when you hire a new superintendent, you don't say to the superintendent, come in here and change all this. You hire them to say, this is what we're about. This is what we've been working on for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And we want to stick with this because we think it's
That's good.
That's right.
If you do that, that turnover in school boards, the election process and administration, really, it's not going to
Affect our kids as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I agree. Absolutely, working as
Thank you.
goals.
Thank you, Dr. Bridges.
All right, does someone have a comment they want to make?
So as we close, to the board, I think it'll be something great if, as we begin to go through this process, that we ask staff to weigh in and give some suggestions and comments back on these slides that has been presented. You've heard today what's been said. You've heard the comments coming back from the board. I think it'll be great to kind of hear back from staff what they think about this process and how we're moving forward, and maybe some things that we may need to consider in this discussion, in this process. It'll be great to hear back from you guys as well. So, Dr. Postwood, if that's all right, if we can move in that direction. But that they'll send those feedback, this information back to us. And you can send it to Portia, I guess. And Portia can compile those. And if you can do those, I would say as soon as possible. That way we can get that information back.
Reverend Matt.
Eric,
Reverend
tomorrow.
Matt.
You can do it by noon tomorrow.
I know staff have a lot of responsibility or a lot on their plate, but if they have some information that they can get back to us by Wednesday, that'd be great too. Of course, you can send them to us because we have a deadline of noon before we move forward. Yes, sir.
Don't take that bait.
It would be nice if,
Well, that's not a bait. I mean, that's
Don't
involved.
take that bait.
if Dr. Postwood, if you would also, with your part of staff, if you would also give us your suggestion of what you think reasonable goals are that you make it that are attainable. Not saying be a step and donut set, but we want to see your side too. Then something we can meet in the middle maybe. You might feel like you can do 50% improvement next year in reading.
All right, so the next thing on our agenda was executive session.
I move that we go into executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Where's my